The Panthers have one final chance to play spoiler. Kind of. Can they do it in Atlanta? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, because on Fridays throughout the entirety of the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your weekly Friday mailbag questions in for next week's show. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. One more game left here in the 2024 regular season for your Carolina Panthers. New year, new Panthers potentially, as Dave Canales' team is, yes, coming off of the disappointing performance on the road against Tampa Bay. But over the last 2 months, they have looked a lot better than they did in the first 2 months of the season, getting the wins at home against, I guess not technically at home, the one in Munich, but still getting those back-to-back wins against the Saints, getting the win against the Giants, playing Kansas City close, playing Tampa close in a game I thought they should have won, playing Philly on the road close in a game I thought they should have won, beating Arizona in a game where the Cardinals had to win if they wanted to stay alive in the NFC West and even in the wild card picture in the NFC. And yeah, there's been the stinker like last week in Tampa, the stinker at home against Dallas. But overall, this has been a far more competitive team, and you can see things heading into the proper direction. Let's not say right direction, as there's still plenty of things the Panthers must do this offseason in order to not just be competitive in some of those games that they've lost, but actually to win those games and get that win total to a point where they're right there actually in the conversation late in the season and maybe even winning the division, as the NFC South still moving forward should still have a lot of questions over who's going to reign supreme over it moving forward. But we'll do this one last time here on a Friday. The 3 keys victory that I always give you throughout the regular season heading into a Panthers game on that Sunday. And unfortunately, this is it. Final game of the year. But I'll give you these 3 keys, even in a game where I think what you're most concerned about is Bryce playing well again and getting to see those young receivers like Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker and Jatavion Sanders, and looking at some defensive pieces and seeing who's worth sticking or keeping around in 2025. Yeah, that's probably the focus, not necessarily winning the game, which will, of course, be difficult. And it's a game where Atlanta has to win. Now, we talked about this yesterday with Aaron Freeman. He is not holding his breath on the Saints helping out Atlanta. Now, unfortunately, there was that tragedy that happened down in New Orleans this past week with that person driving their car on Bourbon Street and so many lives lost, unfortunately, in that senseless attack. Maybe New Orleans is inspired by that and wants to go out there and win that game on Sunday. I don't know, but we'll see how it plays out, as Tampa should be certainly favored, which I think they are by a considerable amount. And they should absolutely win that game on Sunday. But let's not delay. Here are my 3 keys victory coming up on Sunday for the Carolina Panthers against their hated rival Atlanta Falcons down there in the ATL. Number 1, they cannot abandon the run like they did last week. Panther running backs had 11 carries for 31 yards last week versus Tampa. I understand there was no Chuba Hubbard. That was a surprise. He had a grade 2 calf strain that held him go on IR on Saturday, even though Dave Canales said the day before he expected him to play. Of course, Miles Sanders, he's been on IR since getting hurt in Munich against the Giants in that overtime win. Jonathan Brooks is done for the season and maybe even next season with the ACL tear. They didn't have their top 3 backs. They went with Raheem Blackshear. He didn't do a ton. Mike Boone got a couple of carries in that game. Velus Jones got some carries, a single carry. The running backs were ineffective, but it wasn't like they were called upon at really any point in that game to really be a big or a key figure. Because you think about there was two back-to-back 3-and-outs where the only carries were from Bryce Young, and it was all passing attempts. And Dave Canales just went away from it. And I get not having your top three backs, but man, you got to try to at least run the ball. And there's a good chance that Miles Sanders with that ankle is actually back and playing on Sunday. I'll give you an update on the injury report heading to week 18 here later on the show. But Miles Sanders may be back, and Canales had alluded to it earlier this week. If someone's available to go, they will play. He's not just going to have someone sit there. They're trying to win this game and get one other opportunity to really establish that culture and that foundation he's trying to build all season long here in Carolina in his first year. And Miles Sanders, who likely will not be back next year. And there's certainly a question with Jonathan Brooks and his injury. Would it make sense to bring back Miles Sanders? We'll talk about that later on this month when looking at each position group and what the Panthers' plan should be throughout the offseason with each of them. But looking at it just run blocking wise, look at PFF, they're 8th in run blocking. You look at ESPN's pass block win rate. The Panthers are 12th in run blocking. So why not try to run the ball and take some pressure off of your quarterback who has played well? But when you look at the last couple of weeks, it gets me to point number 2 or key number 2. Get back to protecting Bryce Young. Atlanta has 21 sacks and 21 of their 31 sacks, in the past 5 games, while the Panthers have allowed 14 of their 36 sacks in the past 3 games. So Atlanta all of a sudden is becoming a great pass rushing team, while Carolina has not been able to protect their quarterback over the last couple of weeks. And you look at some of the stats looking at Carolina and the sacks they've given up. They've now allowed the 13th most sacks in the NFL. Well, not 13th most, but they're 13th in the NFL in sacks allowed, 19th. Looking at PFF's pass blocking stat, they're 30th in ESPN's pass block win rate. Now, ESPN has not favored this offensive line in pass block win rate all season long, while PFF has certainly looked at them more favorably. And Taylor Moton and Robert Hunt are both questionable heading into Sunday's contest. So their health obviously could factor into what's going to happen with the Panthers' ability to protect Bryce Young. But they got to get back to it. They were really good in keeping them upright, but since the Dallas game, teams have been able to kind of tee off and really get home against Carolina. And last week, when you're not trying to run the football at all, and the Bucs know what you got to do, especially when you're not getting stops defensively and you have no choice but to try and pass, you got to mix things up. And if you're not going to be able to mix it up, if Miles Sanders is not able to go, you got to find a way to protect your quarterback, do a better job picking up the blitz, some things that Carolina has struggled against scheme-wise this season. And then number 3, win a turnover battle. The Panthers have had 0 turnovers the past 2 weeks. That's the only time this has happened this season where they've had back-to-back games without a turnover. The last time that happened was weeks 15 and 16 of last season. Looking at it this year, the Panthers are 2-2 this season when they don't turn the ball over, and are 2-14 in the rest of those games. You look at it when they win the turnover battle, they're 3-2. When they lose the turnover battle, they're 1-6. And going back to that game at home against Atlanta, Carolina was in it. They had an opportunity to drive down the field, potentially tie that game. I believe it was still in the fourth quarter, and then Andy Dalton throws a bad pick trying to target Ian Thomas when it was 28-20. Atlanta takes it all the way down the field. Panthers could not get out the field defensively against the run all day long, especially late in that fourth quarter, and that was pretty much all she wrote in that game. And Bryce has done a good job of taking care of the football outside of that Cowboys game, and he did it again last week. So the hope is they can win turnover battle, not turn it over again on Sunday, and they can find a way to win this game on Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. So win the turnover battle, get back to protecting Bryce Young, and don't abandon a run game, even if you don't have your top 3 running backs out there on Sunday against this Falcons defense. Those are my 3 keys to victory. Jaycee Horn, finally healthy this season and finally showing the rest of the NFL just how good of a player he is. And he's been rewarded as he will be in the Pro Bowl this year. We'll talk about what that means for JC heading into the offseason here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. It's playoff time. If you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns. And for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play or to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Here's a special offer for Locked On Panther listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. We've known for a while now that whenever Jaycee Horn would be healthy, he would prove that he is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. And he's able to be healthy this season, and he's been recognized as he was named to the Pro Bowl on Thursday. A great accomplishment for him, the first-round pick out of South Carolina, who all of us just really wanted to be out there on the field, being able to contribute and being able to show his tremendous talent. And he finally was able to do that this season. He spoke to the media in the locker room on Thursday about the recognition, just saying how important it was to him, calling his dad, Joe Horn, who was a 4-time Pro Bowl wide receiver back in his days in the NFL. And his dad, Joe, apparently broke out into tears, just proud of his son. So great moment for JC, great moment for Joe, and great moment for just the Horn family. And obviously for Carolina, as there have been first-round picks that we've seen, like DJ Moore and like Christian McCaffrey, like Brian Burns, that have come and gone, unfortunately, as Panthers have been in this continuous rebuild mode. There's guys now like Derek Brown, who's a Pro Bowler last year, and now Jaycee Horn, who the Panthers hope they can build around defensively and really just be the faces of their franchise moving forward. And I can feel pretty comfortable. I think they should feel pretty comfortable with the ability for Jaycee Horn to be one of those guys moving forward. And let's think about this. We talked about it this time last year and really throughout the offseason until the decision was made to exercise the fifth-year option of whether it was the right decision for the Carolina Panthers. Jaycee Horn had missed 29 of the possible 51 games in his first 3 years as a Panther. And unfortunately, that led the Panthers to have to really think about whether it made sense for them to invest that kind of capital on a fifth-year option on a player, or should they gamble and not give him the money? And, well, it was kind of the gamble to give him the money in the first place. Now it's kind of on the fence. I saw it both ways. I saw that with the fifth-year option that Jaycee Horn would be getting $12.472 million in 2025, and that the Panthers decided to not give him the fifth-year option. And if he stayed healthy, then the franchise tag him, according to overthecap.com, that would be about $20.3 million. So Carolina saves almost $8 million by exercising fifth-year option and not letting him play out the season and have the season that he had. So clearly, this was the right decision made by Dan Morgan and all involved in that front office to exercise fifth-year option, to see that when JC played, he had been a good player. And also seeing that the broken foot, year one, that's bad luck on that turf field on that Thursday night in Houston. You look at the next year, he had, I think it was a rib injury, then the friendly fire that broke his wrist. Like, both of those are really, I mean, one of them's bad luck. The other one's just the attrition of a football season, and it cost him 2 games. And had that not happened, then he still played the majority of the season, but he doesn't miss more than just 2 games that season. And maybe Carolina ends up not having the day they had against Tampa Bay, and they go to the playoffs, win the division, and who knows, maybe Steve Wilkes is the head coach right now, but instead JC got hurt. And then last year, had the hamstring, had a foot pop up on him again, and that cost him a ton of time. And it's just, it happens. It hadn't been like it was like his own negligence that led to these injuries. And he decided to change things up in his training and to make sure that he could, in his best ability, outside of just luck, prevent it from happening this season. And up until the last 2 weeks where he missed on Sunday with the hip injury, he's going to miss again this upcoming Sunday with a hip injury. JC has been out there. He's been healthy, and he's been a stud for the Panthers, and they absolutely got it right by giving him that fifth-year option, which, again, is going to pay him $12.4 million this upcoming season, opposed to potentially having to give him nearly $8 million more, as the projected franchise tag is at $20.3 million. This year, he's played 15 out of 17 games. That's 98% of the snaps so far this year, has a career-high 13 pass deflections, 68 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, an interception, and 2 sacks. Never had a sack up until late in that fourth quarter against Kansas City. Now Jaycee Horn has 2 sacks in his career. And just looking at it deeper, looking at PFF, he's second among cornerbacks who played a minimum of 80% of the snaps with a 54.4 completion percentage allowed. Only Derek Stingley Jr., who's also been outstanding down there in Houston, has been better than him. He's actually allowing less than half of the completions when targeted, which is kind of crazy. Jaycee Horn has allowed the 4th fewest receptions among those same players that have a minimum of 80% of the snaps that they played, with 37. And when you look at going into the offseason, the Panthers are going to have to take care of JC. They got the 5th-year option. And that's the great thing, too, about it is had they, of course, not exercised it, they then would have franchise tagged JC. That's a $20.3 million that's going to him, but also a cap charge. And they would have until about mid-July to have figured out whether they were going to go and extend him or not. I would imagine they probably would have got it extended to bring that cap number down, but still – better that this way where they can still have the flexibility to extend them this year. There's not a deadline when they got to get it done. Now, you would like to do it ahead of time. I don't want to be a situation that they've been in past years, like with Brian Burns, where they didn't get a deal done and they're sitting there trying to figure out whether they're going to trade him or not. I don't think Jaycee Horn's a player that they want to trade. Now, you would be a premium asset if they wanted to do that. I am vehemently against that, of course, trading away one of the best players and arguably the best player on your team who's now a Pro Bowler and has finally shown his ability to stay healthy and continue to be an outstanding talent that he's been when he's been out on the field, even during those seasons where he was not healthy. So they need to take care of him. And looking at overthecap.com, the valuation they have for Jaycee Horn, and these valuations, they're never on the nose as far as what these players actually get. 4 years, $78.9 million is what they're valuing him. That would be an average salary of $19.7 million. That would put him in the top 5 of cornerbacks paid in the NFL. And I do think Jaycee Horn's going to get up there as far as in the top 5 cornerbacks paid. And that's just kind of how it goes, where you look at the past deals and what those guys made, what their accomplishments were, how you value your player that you have, his accomplishments as well, his age, and you typically end up matching those salaries or maybe even going up more as that money just keeps growing, as the salary cap keeps growing, and the premium of having top-tier corners against this pass-happy league the NFL has turned into becomes even more important every year. And some of the baseline comparison deals they put out there and over the cap, Jair Alexander of the Packers signed a 4-year, $84 million deal. Denzel Ward up in Cleveland, 5 years, $100 million. Pat Surtain the second, who a lot of y'all were saying, man, Panthers got it wrong. They should have taken Pat Surtain 8th overall and not Jaycee Horn 8th overall, as he went to Denver, became a 2-time Pro Bowler, has been a fantastic player. He signed for 4 years, $96 million. AJ Terrell down there in Atlanta, 4 years, $81 million. I got to imagine JC is getting more than AJ Terrell and probably right there around what Pat Surtain got. So I would think he's likely to get a 4-year, about $90 million contract, between probably 85, 90 mil is likely where things are headed for Jaycee Horn this offseason. And he absolutely earns it and he deserves it. And I continue to wish him the best and that he can stay healthy and continue to show us how good of a player he is. And I think a lot of people owe him an apology. A lot of folks that were mad at Jaycee Horn for being injured when clearly it's not like it was his fault or that he didn't want to be playing football out there the last couple of years. So bravo, kudos, Jaycee Horn, Pro Bowl for the first time in his Carolina Panthers career. It's the first of, I think, many, as long as he can stay healthy moving forward. Week 18 injury report. Let's take a look at it and how some injuries like Jaycee Horn is going to impact the Panthers on Sunday down in Atlanta here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong of $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. And speaking of FanDuel, let's look at the line one final time as Carolina Panthers head down I-85 South. Really going to be flying. They're not going to be driving down I-85 South. Now, some of you, man, God bless you, going through the upstate of South Carolina and all that construction. The Panthers are 7.5-point underdogs. They're plus 315 money line. The over-under is set at 48.5. And really no argument there considering all the injuries that they have that we're going to talk about here momentarily on the show. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We have made it to week 18, but not every Carolina Panthers player has necessarily made it to week 18. As we talked about earlier this week on Tuesday, the case for and against Jero Rivero returning in 2025 here in Carolina. I laid out all the players defensively that have been injured, and there's also been a ton of players offensively that have been injured this season, missed a lot of time, and something that we actually talked about following the loss on Sunday in Tampa Bay, and something that we'll talk about again today as we look at the week 18 injury report. The players that are listed as out: Jaycee Horn, of course, as I mentioned, the hip injury, ended up playing 15 out of 17 games, and if he does that the rest of his career, I'm good with that. It's going to happen. It is a brutal game, and the NFL continues to have players playing short weeks and all the travel, and then they want to go out here and add another game potentially in the regular season. If you get a guy who can play 15 out of 17 or in the future 15 out of 18, you got to be happy about that, because it's going to be extremely difficult. The only guys who are going to end up playing every single game defensively this season are going to be Mike Jackson and Xavier Woods. It's a brutal sport, man. And Jaycee Horn played 15 out of 17, the most he's played so far in his career. And I'll take that, and I think you should too. And I do think the Carolina Panthers also will take that. Of course, you want to be healthy in the playoffs, and I don't know what that status would be if the playoffs are coming up. But Jaycee Horn, he's going to be out on Sunday. Amari Barno, shoulders, also out. Josie Jewell, concussion, he's out. Lonnie Johnson Jr., shoulder/neck, he's out. And DJ Johnson, personal, he is out. Now, looking at the cornerback position with JC not playing, either Caleb Farley, who struggled last week in coverage against Mike Evans, which, not really surprising. Mike Evans is a future Hall of Famer. Caleb Farley so far has not lived up to the hype of being a first-round pick, and the hope is now that he's home in Carolina, maybe he can carve out a role in the future. But last Sunday did not necessarily point towards that being a likely future for him here in Carolina. So either he or Caleb Evans will get to start in place of Jaycee Horn. Would imagine that those guys probably rotate, which would make a lot of sense. Why not week 18? Give both those guys an opportunity. But again, Dave Canales is trying to win this game. DJ Johnson, the personal issue is that he was in a car accident this week. Now, fortunately, non-life-threatening. He was back in the facility throughout the week, so it sounds like he's fine, but he's not going to play, unfortunately. So Clowney, Woonem, and Cam Gill. Those are only 3 healthy edge rushers on the active roster right now for Carolina. Kenny Dyson and Thomas Incoom, likely one, maybe both of them will be elevated from the practice squad on Sunday to cover for the losses of Barno and for DJ Johnson, not just edge rusher wise, but special teams wise as well. As both those guys and Lonnie Johnson are big special teams contributors here in Carolina. This could be the 5th game that Josie Jewell misses this season, and it's not ideal when you have Shaq Thompson missing 13, Josie Jewell missing 5, and Trevin Wallace missing 4. That's 22 combined missed starts from the Panthers inside linebackers that started for them this year. And I guess that's not counting Clyde Sherrills, but you're starting inside linebackers. That's not great. Jacoby Windman and Chandler Wooten, likely the next man up. John Radigan's been more of a special teams guy. And even in the last couple of weeks when there's been an opportunity for him to go out there and potentially be a starter, they've gone to Windman, the UDFA out of Michigan State, and they've gone to Chandler Wooten, who they brought back off, I think, the 49ers practice squad a couple of weeks ago. I would guess that those two would be out there. Jackson Mitchell on the practice squad is the other inside linebacker on this roster. Players that are questionable for Sunday: Robert Hunt has a knee. He was a DNP on Wednesday and Friday, limited on Thursday. Ashawn Robinson has a neck injury, did not practice on Wednesday and Thursday, was limited on Friday. Taylor Moton has a knee as well, limited on Wednesday and Friday, but did not practice on Thursday. Miles Sanders, we talked about earlier, with an ankle, potentially coming off of IR this week. Full participant on Wednesday and on Friday, limited there on Thursday. Xavier Legette has the hip and wrist issue. He had a full participation on Wednesday, limited the last 2 days on Thursday and Friday. Jadeveon Clowney, not injury-related /rest, did not practice on Wednesday, and it was a full participant there on Friday, so he should be good to go. And looking just at the offensive lineman, Hunt with the knee and Moton with the knee. Moton missed last week. Yosh Nijman started in place of him. I would imagine if he misses again, Yosh Nijman would be the guy yet again. And if Robert Hunt can't go, that would be Brady Christensen, I would think, stepping in there at that right guard spot on Sunday. So maybe a completely different right side of the offensive line for the Panthers starting on Sunday in that game. And they were better prepared for it this year than they were last year. as we saw when they didn't have Corbett for the first 6 weeks, and then he gets injured and didn't have him the final couple games of that season. I think it was the final 7 games that season, and then they were missing literally every left tackle. It just was a left guard, rather. It was just a complete disaster for them up front last year. That has not been the case. Even with the amount of sacks they've given up, basically a third of their sack total has been given up the last 3 weeks. Carolina has been much better run blocking, much better pass protecting this season, and their quarterbacks have not been under siege. That's been a positive because guys like Brady Christensen have stepped up, Josh Nijman stepped up, Chandler Zavala stepped up, Cade Mays, who was gone, now is back, has stepped up. They have been far deeper and better equipped to handle it, and we'll see what the offensive line situation looks like next year, as there are plenty of questions about what to do up front once we get to the offseason here in a few days' time. So Brady Christensen, Josh Nijman would be next man up at right guard and right tackle, respectively, on Sunday if Hunt and Moton cannot go. Jaden Crumedy likely gets more snaps if A'Shawn Robinson is not able to play. A'Shawn Robinson has led the Panthers in sacks this season. Crumedy got a half sack on Sunday. Hopefully, A'Shawn can play. The fact that he was limited on Friday makes you think that maybe he's going to be close. We'll see. But if he does not play, that would be the second game he's missed so far this season, adding to the total of defensive players who were starters / contributors being out, missing games, and that really leading to the fact that this defense has not been good because they have not necessarily the talent, and they've also been pretty banged up. And yeah, Jiro Vero, he's also to blame, of course. And at this point, I'm kind of expecting Miles Sanders to play in this game. Let me just double check if I've seen anything from Mike K of Joe Person while recording this about what the status is there. Nothing from Joe, nothing from Mike, but I mean, Dave Canales did say earlier this week that if he was able to go, he would go, that they're not going to just sit here and be like, no, last week game of the season, let's just hold him out. Like, if he can play, it looks like he's going to play. So let's see. I think Miles Sanders will be out there and able to play on Sunday. That would be big for the Panthers run game, as again, one of my keys of victory is don't abandon the run like they did last week on the road against Tampa Bay. And I would like to see Mike Boone getting more carries. I know Raheem Blackshear started last week, didn't do much. Mike Boone had one nice carry. The first one that he only had 2 carries for 11 yards in that game. Why not give him more of an opportunity? Something that Mike K actually brought up last Sunday heading to the game, that he expected that Mike Boone would get more carries, and that was not the case. Maybe it'll be the case this Sunday with Miles Sanders coming back, who, hell, you might as well run him to the ground. Probably his final game as a Carolina Panther on Sunday down in Atlanta. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast for our Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where next Friday, the weekly Friday mailbag is back. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me following the game on Sunday. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back here live on YouTube following the game on Sunday one final time.